It's June, that means it's Father's Day month, and that's why today I'm gonna be building one of the most overkill gaming PCs that you could possibly build at the time of making this video, and I'm gonna be giving it away to a father that I think is very deserving, so we'll kind of go to that at the end of this video, but first, we gotta build it. So this video is being brought to you by both Intel and NZXT, so we'll be going over some of the parts here. That's why there's a lot of purple here. It's gonna be a pretty insanely overkill build. So starting with the case here, I went with the white H7 Flow. The H series is a brand new series from NZXT, built upon the legacy of like the H710 and H710i and all that. However, the Flow variant is just that. It is all about airflow in mind. With modern parts requiring so much power and they create so much performance, cooling should be at your forethought when it comes to any modern high-tier part. So the H7 Flow is gonna deliver the airflow that we need to keep these parts cool. I also went with white because the father that I'm giving this build to enjoys white computers. I mean, one of the first builds I ever did for this person was a white case. And I've kind of tried to keep that tradition going over time. Not to mention, I think white just stays cleaner longer. The dust doesn't show up as bad in white. So we live in a dusty, deserty area. I figured white would be the best place to go with that. But the H7 series features enough room for 360 AIOs, long graphics cards, high-tiered performance parts that you're just not gonna have to worry about. Can I fit these fans and this radiator and this graphics card that, you know, is a monster in this chassis? The H7 is going to fit it, and it's gonna give us expandability in the future. So for the motherboard, we are using the brand new NZXT N7 Z690. This is a 12th gen LGA 1700 motherboard, which obviously uses Intel 12th gen. However, this is a DDR4 variant. So if you're trying to follow along on these parts, you know, to try and talk about compatibility and stuff, 12th gen Intel does utilize both DDR4 and DDR5, and it's up to the motherboard manufacturer to spec which memory they're gonna support. So with it being DDR4 means that we can more easily pick from RAM. DDR5's availability is better. However, the price is still pretty high, and DDR4 is fairly available. So we can keep the cost down by going DDR4, and in terms of gaming, we're not gonna notice a difference whatsoever with having the DDR4 RAM versus DDR5. That'd be more of a high-end productivity, something that uses high texture bandwidth with whether it be video editing or Photoshop, working with giant images. Then DDR5 would definitely be potentially a noticeable upgrade. So for a CPU, we're going with a 12700K. It's not as power hungry as a 12900K, but we still have 8 P cores with hyperthreading and 4 efficiency cores available to handle some of the lower level tasks without interfering with the FPS and latency in your games, allowing the P cores to handle the most important tasks, or the performance cores. But with Intel's Turbo Boost Max, it will identify what the best performing cores are, and it will assign those specifically to your game threads and your world threads, so that you are gonna get the best lag-free, latency-free, highest FPS that you can possibly get in your game. So this system right here is gonna be a gaming rig, through and through. Maybe a little bit of productivity, some live streaming. 100% though, this system is gonna live its best life playing games. So we went ahead and also paired that with 32 gigabytes of Delta R T-Force DDR4 RAM, 3200 megahertz sticks, CL16. They are RGB, of course. You know, you gotta have the lights. It's not a gaming rig if you don't have the lights. RGB is really gaming build. Okay, anyway, so we got 4 sticks of T-Force Delta R RAM right there. In terms of storage, I'm putting in a 1 terabyte 980 Pro PCIe Gen 4 NVMe SSD, up to 7,000 megabytes read speed on this. So in terms of loading in your game, that right there, that's gonna make your games load a heck of a lot faster. And any textures and stuff that have to load while you're in a game, the fast PCIe Gen 4 NVMe is gonna allow those textures to load even faster without as much pop in. This is where we get over to the fun part. We are also putting in an EVGA RTX 3080 Ti for the Win 3 Ultra. It's got all the letters and all the acronyms, which means it's got all the FPS. That's all you need to know about it right there. So in terms of keeping things cool, we do have our Kraken Z73 RGB. This is with the infinity ring on here, not the LCD, but it is going to allow you to be able to rotate it so it's always upright. But 360 millimeters worth of radiator to keep our Intel 12th gen as cool as possible. Remember, the cooler you can keep your CPUs, the longer they can boost for. So if you can fit a 360 AIO, which you can in the H7 Flow, we are gonna be doing that. In terms of power, 1000 watt, it's a C1000 Gold power supply from NZXT. This is going to have black sleeved cables, which are gonna look good in any build without having any ketchup and mustard or ugly, nasty, giant sleeving everywhere. Because we got a white build, and this is a white Kraken actually, I know the box shows black, but this is a white Kraken. We have some extra 140mm NZXT fans right here. These are the F140 RGBs. So these are gonna be able to plug right into the RGB controller that's in the case, which will plug directly into the motherboard, which means we can use CAM to control all of our RGB. I'm not sure if we're gonna use this yet. This is the vertical mount GPU kit, which you can use to turn the H7 or any of the H series cases into a vertical mount. It doesn't have it natively in the case, so you have to use an adapter like this. I'm gonna see how it looks before I decide if I'm gonna use this or not. So with all that said and all the parts listed, and you can find all these parts listed down in the description below if you wanna know more about those particular parts, we need to now build the ultimate gaming rig for Father's Day. So as you can see, this turned out absolutely phenomenal, and Phil's B-roll makes all my builds look better than they actually are. No, I'm just kidding. They look good because Phil's B-roll looks good because I build good computer. So anyway, there are a couple things that changed. Let's go and talk about why that changed so you can understand. You might have noticed our RAM changed. The reason for that is the team group RAM can only be controlled by the motherboard. It doesn't have its own standalone software, at least that we could find, to allow us to change the RGB modes. The NZXT motherboard does not communicate with the RAM like, say, some of the other RGB pieces of software out there do to allow you to be able to sync it with stuff that's happening. We tried OpenRGB, we didn't try Signal RGB, but we tried OpenRGB. It, for whatever reason, could not see the team group. So as an upgrade, I went ahead and installed two 16GB sticks of, because the other thing we noticed is you can't run 4 sticks of team group DDR4. The QVL for this motherboard does not support 4 sticks of team groups 3600 or 3200 megahertz, whichever sticks they were, I forget. So we were getting boot loop problems. We were getting a memory light to come on and we were getting boot loops and it wouldn't install Windows. Like we can get into the BIOS and stuff just fine, but we couldn't progress. So taking out 2 sticks fixed the problem. So instead of running 16 gigabytes of memory, I put 2 16 gigabyte sticks of Ballistix Max RGB 4400 megahertz DIMMs. And it is running 4400 megahertz right here. So the same amount of RAM, and it's only using 2 sticks, and Ballistix has their own mod. It's called mod, their software, to control the RGB and stuff on here, because again, the motherboard doesn't control the RGB on the RAM. So that's why the RAM changed. Also too, we went ahead with the vertical mount, even though I said I wasn't sure if I was going to, because of the fact that I was worried about it being too close to the glass, but looking at their vertical mount here, you can see it so far back and so close to the motherboard. There's tons of space in front of this graphics card to be able to pull air into the cooler and not worry about it. And another thing that we really liked about this particular vertical mount, because this will work in other cases, is it's got that foot. You can see there's a foot in the front. It is threaded and adjustable, so it is taking some of that vertical weight. Although this is a perforated plate, it does sag just a little bit with that weight, but if it were a solid piece of metal, it wouldn't sag as bad. Regardless, you can't even tell unless you really look for it. That means the graphics card's not gonna be flexing this way and putting all that torque on the case back there, and it's performing, you know, we're gonna test it right now, but it's performing really well with this much gap, because this cooler design too, with that wave in it, is also designed to allow it to have a volume of air in front of the fans had it been closer to the glass. So everything with this build really worked out in terms of just fitting together really, really well. I want to talk about cam real quick. Cam has been around for quite a while. No, NZXT's not asking me to talk about cam. I'm doing this on my own because I'm one of the first people on YouTube that really showed cam. And that's when it was kind of like a side pet project for one of their developers. And it was never intended to be anything like huge or even like a backbone of any of their software. It became that way. But one of the problems with cam in the beginning was the fact that it was very resource heavy. Running cam was significantly impact your CPU. I mean, they were seeing up over 10% of CPU usage just to run cam. And it takes a lot of it takes a lot of overhead typically for a lot of sensors to be read. For instance, reading the CPU, reading the usage, the temperatures, GPU temperature, GPU usage, what are the fan curves, what's your current network speed, your input, your output, or uplink, your downlink, what is your hard drive storage looks like, what are your smart temps, like to access all of those things. That's a lot to ask for any piece of software to be able to do. To this day, people still go, oh, cam is terrible, cam uses too much overhead. And that's from people that are still basing their 2022 opinion off of their 2016 experience. So I want to show you real quick here. I've got cam up. This is the dashboard here, and you've got a ton of different things that you can see. But you can see right now, we can see CPU temperatures at 27C. You can see our clock is at 4900. Our fans, which right now this is technically our AIO, because I do have the RPM header plugged into the CPU header, and then the actual control for the AIO plugged into the AIO header on the motherboard. But because it's an NZXT motherboard, we can control all of those speeds and stuff through cam. So it's nice to have one area to tie that all in without having to go into the BIOS to change things, because this directly talks to the BIOS. Moving on, you can see here, top processes. This is telling you what's running and using the most of your CPU and your RAM and your network connection. What are your drive storages? Right here is your GPU temps and fan speeds and all that sort of stuff. But check this out. Here's cam right here. There's technically 3 instances of it running to do all this. And as a whole, it is using 0.1% CPU and 186 megabytes of memory. To put this into comparison, I have 3D Mark running right now. It is just sitting here in the background ready to go. It is using anywhere from the same to twice the CPU that cam does, and 3 times the memory. Well, a time and a half, 2 times the memory. That's just from having the application open. This right here is using more than cam is. So I just wanted to point out that cam is something that they have definitely improved upon over time. So if you are running NZXT stuff, you owe it to yourself to at least give cam another try, even if you're not running NZXT stuff, because it is free and it will work with anything on your system that it can communicate with. So graphics card, CPU, it's good as an overlay to just tell you what's happening with your system, and you can turn it on, turn it off as you please. Anyway, that out of the way, that was not sponsored. This is, again, just my own opinion regarding cam. They have definitely decreased the weight of it on your system. Speaking of weight on system, I have it open right now because this is how I'm gonna monitor temperatures right now. I wanna go ahead and let Cinebench R23 run. I have not personally run a 12700K yet. This is my first time running it and really kind of paying attention to the temperatures and the scores and all that sort of stuff. So it is an 8 P-core, 4 E-core system. So the nice thing about the 12700K is instead of shaving down the P-cores, they actually shaved down the E-cores, but 4 E-cores is still more than enough to handle your non-intensive, non-priority tasks, keeping the overhead on your CPU low, while the P-cores are still available to do other things. Like for instance, right now, run Cinebench right here. Right now it's at about 69C. Now this is updating slowly on cam because of the fact that this is considered a background task right now. Cinebench is such a heavy load, it's so intensive. A lot of the other software like this becomes a lesser priority. So it makes sense right now that it is kind of not updating at the rate that I would like, but I would also much rather the CPU handle something like Cinebench than handling this in the background. There we go. So 71C is where we currently are. That's the nice thing about the 12700K is the fact that it doesn't use as much voltage. It doesn't have as much core density. Really, it's just the E-cores that shave down, but it is a couple hundred megahertz lower than the 12900K. So this makes it a lot more friendly on coolers and such. So in terms of our score though, it actually scored a 21,969. That's pretty amazing in terms of its performance there. So let's do this now. I want to also see what our GPU temps are gonna be like. So for Precision X1, which is what we use for EVGA graphics cards, the nice thing about this too is once you load EVGA's Precision X1, it will, if there's a firmware update available for your EVGA card, it will update the firmware. So we're talking about things like the video UEFI BIOS, any compatibilities there, it will update it. We've talked about in the past before how 3080 Ti's came out at a weird time where their video BIOS was having an issue with certain monitors and not allowing you to get into BIOS, just skipping it and going right into Windows or a black screen altogether. We did that video already, but opening up Precision with an EVGA card will update that BIOS. I do have an overclock going here. I've got 500 megahertz overclock on the RAM, which I know it'll go higher. I know this card will go up to 1,000, but I'm leaving it at 500. And a 100 megahertz overclock on the GPU core, leaving the voltage slider where it is. We do have our fan curve set to user defined, so it's not gonna go into zero fan mode. And then I've maxed out the power limit. Because again, if there's gonna be any sort of weird temperature issues, I wanna find them. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna load up Port Royal. Port Royal is going to load the card in its entirety. It's gonna load the RT cores. It's gonna load the CUDA cores. I don't think it's gonna load the tensor cores because that would take some load off. But regardless, we are gonna run this thing right now through its paces and see what the temperatures are like. If the vertical mount is a problem, I want it to show us, although I don't believe it's going to be one because there is a gap between it and the motherboard and stuff. I think it's gonna be perfectly fine. So the air coming out of the back of the case is like maybe slightly warmer than ambient. The case fans haven't even ramped up, although I don't have any case fan ramping set up. So that's the kind of stuff I would go in and tune a system for cooling. You guys want me to do a video about system tuning and fan tuning for temperatures? Anyway, the RPM of the fans didn't even really ramp up on the, we maxed out at 68C right at the end there with the fan curve not even like going higher. We got a graphics score of a 13,694. I mean, that's not bad. That's right where the 3090s were landing. And the 3080 Ti custom cards, especially with that little bit of overclock, is definitely keeping things nice and cool. I mean, obviously I'm not gonna go through here right now and do like full tuning of it, but this is the kind of thing I will do prior to giving it to the Faja that I had in mind. How about no, you crazy well, this one just doesn't want to let me overclock it, so whatever, that's fine. So I'm just gonna go back to the core clock where it was. I'm gonna let it loop, and I'm gonna turn up the fans a little bit. And I wanna see where the temperatures kind of cap out. So I was letting it loop and loop and loop, and I was kind of finding where it would crash. Looks like about a 180 offset is where we crash. However, I had the voltage slider maxed to the max allowed voltage at an earlier frequency. And if we take a look at the hardware, you can see we were 68, again, was our max. Not bad at all, not bad. So anyway, this has been a fun one because one of the things I really like doing on this channel is to just, how can I take this and make it bigger than just me? So I am gonna be giving this computer to my brother-in-law, Frank, for Father's Day. Let me tell you a little bit about Frank real quick. Frank is he's a single income parent. So he's not a single parent, he's married obviously, and he's got 3 daughters. I've got 2 daughters, he's got 3. He's got me beat, trust me, when it comes to having his hands full, and they're all much closer to age. However, he's a single income. So his wife's a stay-at-home wife, and he works really long, crazy hours, most of the time graveyard shifts, to provide for his family. He told me for a while that he was gonna use his tax return to finally build himself a new computer for his wife. So I think it was 2018, right around 2018 for Christmas, I gave him a build that I built here because he was still running the computer that I built on this. You guys remember way back in the day, like at the start of my channel, I did a giant how to water cool a PC tutorial where I was sitting in my living room with a table and did the big white Switch 810 case, water cooled case. Actually, no, I think it was a Phantom. I can't remember which case it is. It's his case, I don't remember. Maybe it was a Switch 810. Doesn't matter. That's the same computer he was using up until that point. It had two 680 or GTX 680s in there in SLI water cooled. He gave that to his wife when I built him the new computer. She's been using that computer ever since. Now I built that computer in like 2012, 2013. That computer's going on 10 years old. It can't play any modern title. Like without, she tries to play Phasma with him. He plays Phasmophobia. She tries to play Phasmophobia with him, Ghost Elite, like a lot of the, or Ghost Hunters Elite, or Ghost Exile, sorry. These are indie titles that the computer just cannot run. So instead of tax return, tax return season kind of came and went, and notice I didn't really hear. I expected maybe some questions like, hey, what do you think I should spend my money on? I have no problems answering questions for friends and family, obviously, on how I would spec a computer. Didn't hear anything. My birthday rolls around and he gives me an electric guitar. He spent his tax return money on me. So the least I could do is provide him with what I feel is the top of the line gaming system that you could build today. Realistically, I mean, the 12900K could go in here, but that would be wasted power and energy on something he's not going to use it for. Could still do plenty of live streaming with this, no problem, zero drop frames. A 3080 Ti, could use the NVEC encoder. I can help him set him up to be the best quality stream that he's ever had. But that means the other computer he was using now he could give to his wife, and now they can play together, which is something they haven't been able to do. And trust me, as somebody whose wife wants absolutely nothing to do with computers, nothing to do with gaming, I'm envious over the fact that his wife, my wife's sister, plays games with him and mine doesn't. So the least I could do is bring them together with that. And Frank, you're seeing this video before I've told you about it, so now you know. You can pick it up on Sunday. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Once again, a huge thank you to Intel and NZXT for sponsoring today's video where we get to build the ultimate gaming PC for Father's Day. And I cannot personally think of a more deserving father for this computer to go to. Thanks for watching, guys. If you've got a dad, father figure in your life, or you're a single parent filling the father role, make sure you show some appreciation to that parent or that guardian. Trust me, we need more than one day a year to celebrate our parents, but if we have to do it only one day a year, show some appreciation. I lost mine in 2017, so do something before you can't anymore. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.